This signing has some massive implications for the Winnipeg Jets. On today, the second day of the free agent frenzy, Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets have gone ahead and signed Gustav Nyquist to a one-year deal to come up to Winnipeg and join the Jets as they go and chase their cup once again this year. I'm going to talk to you guys all about Gustav Nyquist, who he is as a player, where he fits into this lineup, and of course, what does this mean for a guy like Ehlers, another guy who we're waiting to see where he's going to go. He's taking his time with his signing. But before we jump into all that, I couldn't help but notice on our last video, we had about 74% of the people who watched that were not subscribed to the Jets Digest channel. I'd highly suggest you guys throw us a subscription. We're going to be making content all throughout the offseason, anything related to the Jets, RFA signings, likely anything regarding Ehlers. Once we find out where he is going, we'll be talking all about that, and you don't want to miss anything there. But let's jump right into our video today. We're talking, of course, about Gustav Nyquist. So let's head over to our quote from Chris Johnson on Twitter. Of course, the first one to get there was Elliot Friedman to announce that he was signing here, but we do get the terms here. It is a one-year deal. Sorry, I'll read it verbatim. Gustav Nyquist signs a one-year deal with Winnipeg worth $3.25 million. Of course, this is from Chris Johnston on TSN, formerly of The Athletic, doing a lot of other things. I'd suggest you throw him a follow. He's a great insider on Twitter. But let's talk, of course, now about Gustav Nyquist. So let's go over to his stat sheet. Last year, he played with both the Nashville Predators and the Minnesota Wild. He was a trade deadline guy. Throughout 79 games, he scored 11 goals, had 17 assists for 28 points. As you can see, he is a 5'11", and he is age 35. So Kevin Cheveldayoff, once again, getting a lot more leadership. It looks like he's kind of building a bit of a retirement home here. Of course, you've got Gustav Nyquist being 35. You've got Jonathan Toews being, I think he's 37 now. And, of course, we had Tanner Pearson signed just the other day. If you want to know what I think about that, feel free to go check that video out. But let's talk about Gustav Nyquist specifically. So this is a guy who has provided it's a guy who maybe, let's say like 10 years ago, I would have been super jazzed. I mean, even less than 10 years ago, let's just say 6 years ago, I would have been super jazzed to see this guy join the Winnipeg Jets. But, as he's gotten older, as all players do, he's started to slow down. He definitely took a real big dip when he was 31, 32, 33, but not this past season because, he started off the season with the Nashville Predators, who, were one of the biggest disappointments of the league last year. But the year before with the Nashville Predators, he did have 75 points in 81 games. So that's, at least a bright spot to look at. And, obviously you don't expect a guy to, just regain his form out of nowhere. But I do think that the Nashville Predators last year were such an interesting circumstance that I think that it's not necessarily a perfect view on how a player goes. Like, the classic thing of watching a player who leaves a place like Anaheim or, San Jose or Ottawa, wherever. I'm not going to just throw darts at teams and call them bad, but when guys leave bad teams and go and play on better teams, sometimes that can completely change things. So I'm not going to hold my breath that he's going to be, a point a game kind of guy, but I do still think that this guy has a lot to give at the NHL level. He's always been a speedy guy. A lot of you may remember that one clip when he was back on the Detroit Red Wings near the start of his career, where he's just, circling and circling around in the offensive zone for, 45 seconds before he finally goes in and scores. But in regards to this player right here, the biggest thing is that what this is telling me, as we've seen, the Nikolai Ehlers sweepstakes play out on Twitter, he's currently wagering his options, and we knew that he wasn't going to make a decision in the first day, but it is now the second day here. I've seen a couple different reports saying he's whittled it down to 2 teams. I know the Caps are one of the ones that he's seriously considering joining, and my guess is at this point in the free agent frenzy is that he's informed Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets that he will not be returning, which is going to be a huge blow. I think that it's going to be, I think fans are going to be surprised at how big of an impact this guy had on the Winnipeg Jets. But regardless, that's just more what I think this deal with Gustav Nyquist implies. So but we're not going to talk about Nikolai Ehlers here. I can go on a whole diatribe about why that guy was super duper important to the Jets' run last year and becoming the President's Trophy team. So let's get back on topic. Let's talk about Gustav Nyquist. Let's go over and see his advanced stat chart, or his advanced stat card here, of course, from JFresh Hockey. We love JFresh. Go throw him a follow. Again, if you've never seen these before, blue is good, red is bad. When you see a percentage, that's where the player ranks throughout the league in that stat. So, of course, his projected WAR, which means wins above replacement, it just takes stats that, come together to make to stats that come together and usually lead to wins. So you can kind of generally put a figure on it. Anyways, the point is, this guy ranks about 27th in the league. You can see his time on ice was a second liner, which, again, I don't see him as that. He's, at this point in his career, probably a third liner. Definitely not a fourth liner yet, but you can see he does generate a decent amount of offense for being a 35-year-old player. He's still middle of the pack in the league at generating offense at even strength. You can see his 55% there. Unfortunately, he is a bit leaky when it comes to the defensive end of the puck, which is, not uncommon for some of the Jets players to have, but you gotta, take what you can when it comes to free agency. And honestly, giving a guy like this $3.25 million for 1 year, I have no issue with it. Again, if you are going to be losing Nikolai Ehlers, you do need to do something in order to fill that hole. And while, yes, this will not, there's not a chance that this guy will provide anywhere near the amount of value that Nikolai Ehlers does to the Winnipeg Jets. But again, when you're in a place where you have a guy who's so super duper valuable leaving you, and you have a window of contention that you need to, try and stay and be a contender in. Of course, we're talking about the window that, Connor Hellebuyck has given here, and, of course, Mark Scheifele too. But, again, not the point. Let's get back to Gustav Nyquist here. The other thing I notice here as well, he plays PK. He's actually pretty decent on the PK. He plays power play. I would imagine this guy is going to play second power play for the Jets, probably take Mason Appleton's role. And honestly, he'll probably take Mason Appleton's role on the third line as well, too. I had another video before where I talked about Cole Koepka probably taking that role from Mason Appleton. This guy feels like the actual replacement there. On that, on the third line, once you do get the trickle down. I'd imagine Iafallo will be playing in the top six. You still have Gabe Vilardi and everyone else. The usual suspects in that top six. But speaking about that, let's actually go over to the depth chart here. So you guys can see here, this is just a mock-up of kind of what the team is going to look like, come October. But you see there is some holes at right wing and, left defense too. That's obviously going to be for Gabe Vilardi. That's going to be for Dylan Samberg. But this is what the team is probably going to look like come start of the season. Of course, you have the classic Connor Scheifele Vilardi, Iafallo, Taves, Perfetti, Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, and Gus Nyquist. Again, Adam Lowry will be on IR until probably the new year, at least December, as he's getting hip surgery. And I wouldn't expect that to be a quick recovery or anything like that. And then you, of course, have your fourth line of Tanner Pearson, David Gustafsson, and Cole Koepka. Of course, there's going to be other guys in camp who are going to be challenging for spots. There's going to be Nikita Chibrikov, who's going to be who definitely looks like he should be poised to make a run at making the big team this year. You've got Brad Lambert, a guy who's got a ton of potential, but didn't really put it all together in the AHL last year. Who knows what a strong offseason could do for him. And you've also got a guy like Braden Yager, much younger, but is very, very promising, has a ton of potential, could force his hand into getting into this roster. But regardless, even if those guys can't pull through, this is what we're kind of looking at as a Jets roster. And I'll be honest with you, it definitely looks not as good as the year before. I don't love some of the things going on defense. But regardless, when you have Connor Hellebuyck, when you have Mark Scheifele, and who knows if Jonathan Taves can really, show that he's back, this team could still be pretty decent next year. But, of course, that has to do with, can the Jets make up for the loss of Ehlers in the aggregate? You're going to want to see a lot of things coming out of Gustav Nyquist. Hopefully, he's able to provide some decent value on the power play, on power play 2. decent value also on the PK. He's kind of just a utility player, and as I said, having scored nearly a point a game 2 seasons ago, he again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but he had 75 points in 81 games. That's very, very good for a guy who at the time was 33, 34, but as everyone knows, as you get older, those point productions can fall off a cliff. So it'll be really interesting to see how Gustav Nyquist fits into this team come October. But if you did enjoy the video, please give us a like. Make sure you are subscribed, as we are making tons of Jets content going forward, and have yourself a wonderful summer.